Hey, friends, welcome to another episode of the Tennis and Bagels podcast. This is Vansh, and as all of you listeners know, we have this tradition here at the Tennis and Bagels podcast, and it's been a great tradition, especially after the last five editions of majors. We've always had on the wonderful Steve Flink. He's a renowned tennis writer, and he was inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame, and he joins us once again as we recap Roland Garros. So here's our conversation with Steve. Hello, Steve. Pleasure as always. Our listeners enjoy this a lot, and I enjoy it immensely. It's a pleasure, bouncing off different takes and doing a recap of each major. So, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Vansh. It's nice to be back with you. It was quite an interesting fortnight at Roland Garros this time, so I think we've got a lot to talk about.
Sweet. Let's get right into it. So, obviously, generally I like to start off with the final, the men's final, and obviously, it was a bit of an anticlimactic match. So I think I'd rather start sort of midway through the tournament, because obviously Rafael Nadal won his 22nd major and 14th at Roland Garros, which is just astounding that he has the same number of Roland Garros titles as Pete Sampras does, total majors. But looking at his run, obviously, this was a remarkable run. He beat four top 10 players en route to the title. That's only ever happened three times in the Open era. The previous two being Roger Federer at the 2017 Australian Open, and then you have to go all the way back to Mats Wilander, who did it as a 17-year-old in 1982 at Roland Garros, where he beat Vilas in the final. But I guess,
yeah. That one, just to interrupt briefly, that was the most spectacular because, Mats knocking off Lendl and Clerc and Gerulaitis and finally Vilas. I mean, that string of wins, when retrospectively I look back on that, and was the best achievement of all, because those were all really tough players for him to beat, particularly at that stage of his career. And so that to me was the foremost achievement among the examples that you're citing.
Terrific. That seems really impressive, especially to do that at 17, with the minimal experience he had at that point. But I guess, should we start with the Felix match? Because obviously that was the third time that he was pushed to a fifth set ever at Roland Garros, and Aliassime really pushed him, and Nadal had to come up with some spectacular points, particularly in the last two games of the fifth set, where we really saw, I guess, vintage Nadal. So
yeah, I would say you're so right, and I think he played the last three games well. I thought that Felix probably lamented a bit the break point that cost him the break that put him down 5-3, because he had Rafa beautifully anticipated Felix's forehand angle drop volley, but I think he didn't get enough angle on it. And if you look at the replay, you see that Rafa is not stretched that much. He has to get forward, but he doesn't have to get that wide. And that's one I think that Felix would have liked to have had over, as they say. But really, that's so little that you can fault him on. I'm nitpicking when I say that, because he played a terrific match, and Felix, he got up that 5-1 lead in the first set, and Rafa managed to get the next couple of games that Felix closes that out. And then it looked to me, Vanch, like Rafa had taken real control of the match in the second and third sets. And I was figuring, oh, well, this is going to be 6-3 in the fourth, pretty comfortable. And then he loses his serve from 40 love in the second game of the fourth. That was very costly. And even though he broke back, he lost his serve again. The set got away. It was really hanging in the balance. And Felix played a terrific match, and makes me wonder, Vanch, not that Felix isn't a very good clay court player, but it makes me wonder about just how dangerous he's going to be for Rafa, Novak, and the others when he gets on the quicker courts. I mean, even at Wimbledon, for instance, where he beat Zverev last year, he had that great Open before losing to Medvedev. So I still think he's actually a little better on hard and grass. And so it was a great effort to push Rafa to his limits on the clay at Roland Garros.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, especially if you look at the last four majors. I mean, he's made a quarters, a semis, and had match points against Medvedev, and then, comes really close here. What did you make of the sort of coaching dynamics that were at play with Uncle Tony being in his box?
Here's what I'm glad you brought that up. It makes me think of when it was first announced that Uncle Tony was going to work with Felix. And I thought to myself, how is he going to do that? There are going to be times when these two are going to meet. How is he going to be able to handle that? The dynamics of that, the complexities of it, the conflicted loyalties. And I think it really showed. He had to find a neutral place to watch the match, found a great seat behind the court, I guess in the president's box or whatever they call it, dignitaries area. That was smart. But he said a few things that perplexed me. I mean, he basically said he was rooting for Rafa. I don't see how you can do that when you're coaching Felix. Felix publicly didn't seem annoyed, but I think that's something that Tony's got to sort out in his mind, at least for the short term, while Rafa is still in the game. Because I guess what I'm saying is I always thought Uncle Tony would wait until Rafa was done and then pick whatever player he wanted, or work with some young player that was where it wasn't. But Felix, obviously, we knew how great he was going to be. And I feel like Uncle Tony's in a tough spot, and Rafa's very understanding of the whole thing. But I think a coach's first loyalty must be to his player. And the problem is when his player is colliding against his nephew, his real loyalties were with his nephew.
Yeah, I was quite surprised that he gave those interviews, especially, knowing all of these facts, that he put himself out there like so publicly, and, must be a really awkward position for Felix, but I guess Felix agreed to those.
Yeah.
To those
and Felix, yeah, you're right. And Felix was very gracious about the whole thing. And you didn't sense any kind of a problem from his end or uneasiness but who's to know what's going on behind the scenes? Who's to know how he felt? You can't feel good as the player, though, to hear your coach say that. He understands that Uncle Tony's going to always have affection for Rafa and great sympathy and love as a family member. But this was about a big tennis match being played where one player is going to move on to the quarterfinals of the French Open and the other one is not. And so to me, it's as simple as that. And you have to be able to. And the other thing is, I guess, I don't know what your read on it was, Vansh, but I'm assuming he really didn't say much to Felix before the match either. That's also part of the deal, is that you have to help Felix figure out how to beat Rafa. You got to come up with the right game plan. And I don't think Tony wanted to do that. Was that your read?
That was my read as well. On that situation, that I don't think he really got that much tactical advice or guidance before going into the match. But I was impressed by Felix's problem solving that match. I thought he went to the drop shot quite a bit. I thought he really mixed things up, and he didn't play sort of his usual, bang bang first strike tennis that seemed to work so well, and that got him 2 sets as well. Because I thought every time they went into a long baseline rallies, it was still Nadal who had the edge. But I was impressed with Felix's all court sense in that match, and he really seemed like he approached that match with confidence and belief, as he should have.
And as you're saying, with a lot of thoughtfulness, probing, and a lot of variety, and that was impressive. And he certainly didn't play a bad fifth. It came down to that one break. So he really played. I thought he really played. I don't think he played great in the third set. I thought he played really well in the first, pretty well in the second. Not a good third, a fine fourth, and an impressive fifth. So he's got nothing to be ashamed of. And it certainly would give him confidence if for some reason, if Rafa's able to recover physically and this procedure works and he does play Wimbledon and they happen to meet again, I think that match will have helped Felix a lot to go out there believing and feeling like, okay, if I really serve my best on the grass and I'm disciplined, I can be in this match again. I've got another shot.
Absolutely, yep. So let's talk about the Djokovic match now. Of course, Djokovic, his clay court season didn't start off in a great way. He lost to Davidovich Fokina and kind of wilted a bit in the third set there. Hadn't played in a long time. Of course, we know all the events that happened in Australia. He started building, sort of getting better week after week, got to the finals in Belgrade, but again, ran out of gas, 4 straight 3-set matches. And then he really hit his stride, I thought, in Rome. And he played a fantastic match against Felix, knocks off Ruud, wins the title there in the final over Tsitsipas.
Also, just let me add to that. He also played well in Madrid. He got a default.
Yes.
He only had a couple of matches before playing Alcaraz, but it was really... Of his many losses in the last couple of years, it was probably the best performance he's given in defeat. So that wasn't really discouraging either. And then, as you point out, he goes to Rome, doesn't lose a set. And he also didn't lose a set all the way up to Rafa. He was looking and I thought he looked particularly impressive in the round of 16 against Diego Schwartzman, who's a first-rate clay court player, as we know. Yeah. Going through the years and beating Rafa a couple of years ago in Rome and losing to Rafa the last couple of years at Roland Garros. Terrific clay court player. And Novak made him look pedestrian that day. So I really thought he was peaking coming into this match with Rafa.
Yeah. And, I thought the same, and then I thought, I thought obviously it was a great start by Nadal, but I was a bit perplexed why Djokovic wasn't the one who came out, sort of guns blazing and sort of matched him. Okay, the last three times that they played at Roland Garros, I've always felt like, obviously we had the bagel in 2020, and then he was down 5-love, but he
Oh,
quickly started getting things together. The first couple of games were close last year, and then it was a 6-3 first set. But here,
yeah,
he
yeah.
let Rafa off to a really really fast start, and Rafa took full advantage, and he went up 3-love in the second, and then we sort of had Novak having to play like one of the most. He had to really redline get himself back in that set and win 6 of the next 7 games, and I felt like that second set was the only time in the match where I felt like both players were playing really well at the same time, and as a result, we had two really lengthy games, almost 30 minutes, and
Yeah, right.
that set, although it was nothing like their third set last year. It was still about an hour and a half, and I felt like it took so much out of Djokovic physically, but I was surprised at the level dip in the third, and
Yeah,
it was
what,
just kind of a strange match with a lot of ebbs and flows. So
yeah, you described it well. You described it well, and I think you share my. I would use the word perplexed as well to describe, at least in part, to describe Novak's performance. Let me just get to a couple of things backing up what you said. Ivan Isovich made some comments. You probably might have read some of this interview that he did that was widely circulated. And he said that he had warned Djokovic that he had to start better this year. You would think after the last 2 years and the cases that you mentioned, where he gets obliterated in the 2020 final and then could have lost the set 6-love again, first set last year, and got it back to 5-3, that he would have been really completely concentrated early on, saying, I'm going to stay with him early on. I'm not letting him have any early leads this time. The first set is far too important. He managed to come back a year ago, but that's a very hard way to do it against Rafa. I mean, if you look at it, it's almost impossible to do. And he's the only guy to have done that, to have come from a set down at Roland Garros to beat Rafa.
mhm.
And I feel like you said he didn't have guns blazing. That's a good way to describe it. He didn't. The very first game of the match, if you looked at the points, he was playing a lot of defense on his own serve. Now, partly is you're missing first serves doesn't help, but he seemed almost content to play the defense as opposed to get on the ascendancy and get on top of the rally and be the aggressor. That perplexed me. And then he ends up losing a tough game. Could have held. I think he had at least one game point, but that was important, and he got behind, and then he had a chance to break back. He couldn't get it. The first and third sets, Vansh, were very similar to me. He gets down the immediate break. The difference in the second set is he managed a spectacular comeback from 2 breaks down. But in the first and third, he got down the early break, had a chance to get back on serve, couldn't take it, and then things unraveled. Because I don't think there should be two, as well as Rafa was playing, Novak shouldn't be losing 2 sets 6-2 that way, particularly the third. And my question for you is, do you think he was really that physically tired at the start of the third? I don't think so. I think it was partially a mental lapse.
Yeah, you would think a set like that would give him a psychological boost, and he'd go into the third, with a lot more confidence. But he seemed to just get a little bit passive to me, and just
he did.
And I also felt like his return of serve, he wasn't doing well on the second serve returns. He was like a little too far back, and he wasn't attacking, and that and taking them on like on the rise, and that way starting to get the points more in his favor and make Nadal hit more backhands. And I thought he did a really good job of that in the second set, but he sort of went away from that in the third.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Great job in the second. So look at here are the facts. He's down 2 breaks in the second set. He breaks Rafa 3 times. He broke him 1 more time in the fourth. Didn't break the first or the third. That's very telling. That should not happen. When he being the great returner that he is, and I think partially it's for the reasons you described, a little too far back, a little too passive in it. He should have. And the second set, his attitude was to make really deep, aggressive returns, and on the second or third shot, create an opening for a winner and hit it, blast him on the court, which is what he did. And I was very surprised that he didn't start the third better, and then Rafa was really reassured by that, because he quickly was back on top of things, back in control in a hurry. But then we should talk about the fourth, because Djokovic didn't lose. He got that early break. Rafa disputed that one call on the sideline and proved the TV replay was pretty conclusive that the ball was wide.
You're talking about the backhand drop shot cross court.
Yeah, backhand angle drop that went just wide. And so that gives Novak the quick early break finally for him. He's got it. That really seemed to fuel him. And I thought he was playing one good service game after another right up until he served for the set. And then that was another one of those moments that was a bit confounding because he served really well in that game. He had a couple of really good first serves into the corners that helped him get to 2 set points. Served well up to that point. Then on the first set point, all he's trying to do is angle a backhand cross court. He's not trying to hit it hard. He's just looking to open the court. I don't ever see him miss that shot in the net. I can't remember the last time I saw him, but he did there. And then he gets the second set point. Rafa's return was inside the service line. Novak made an aggressive play, and then Rafa hits another short ball. And Novak really should have nailed the approach deep and closer to the sideline. Instead,
way too central.
Way too central,
not
and
deep enough.
Not deep and not close enough to the sideline. It was a really easy pass down the line for Rafa. And that was really costly to have those two openings because we'll never know how the fifth set would have played out. But Novak had played well enough to win the fourth. Then in addition to that, he played, I thought for him, a poor tiebreak until he was 6-1 down. And then he kind of loosened up and won a couple of points on his serve, won one on Rafa's before Rafa closed it out. But that was too big a deficit. Yeah. And it wasn't a classic Djokovic. In other words, he didn't have that deep intensity we saw in the third set tiebreak a year ago, the one that swung the whole match, that gave him the 2-1 lead in the 4-set tiebreak this time, because that was a second chance. It was a chance for him to make amends for not serving the set out. And I thought Rafa was much better prepared for that tiebreak and much more confident. So it was surprising given the circumstances. And Rafa's come off a 4-hour and 21-minute match against Felix. He's got all these issues with his foot, which granted he took care of with the injections, but I just thought we would have seen a Djokovic much more self-assured and confident. A Djokovic more like the one we saw last year, that once he got his teeth into the match, he enjoyed it. He exuded a nice confidence and a sense of the spirit that you like to see in him. And this time it was only Rafa was the one. And again, even Ivanisevic alluded to that. He talked about the body language of both players. And there's no doubt that Rafa carried himself like someone who believed he was going to win. And Novak carried himself like someone who had some nagging doubts. And Ivanisevic commented on that too. He hadn't had a chance to talk to Novak when he did this interview, but that he was, I don't think he understood it. I think he felt going in, Novak was ready.
Yeah, there's a lot of good analysis and lots to unpack there. I think also the other thing that was telling, sorry.
Quick thing, think about the implications of this match. That's why it's surprising that Rafa had it, for all he talks about not wanting to worry about these things, and he acts as if he doesn't really care that much about how they end up in the Grand Slam title race, which I don't believe, by the way. But that's his way of taking pressure off himself. But Novak, he knew the implications. And here's the other thing, Vansh. They both knew that the kid had lost. They both knew Alcaraz had lost to Zverev, which was a big deal because I think either one of them, neither one really necessarily wanted to play Carlos. They weren't afraid of him, but they knew how dangerous Carlos was. And they weren't underestimating Sasha. But I think in their minds, I really believe in the minds of both players, that they thought in essence they were playing a final, that this title was going to be in their hands if they could get through this match, be in the semis, play Zverev, because there wasn't anybody on the other half that was going to beat them. That's how I looked at it. And I would have thought Novak, who's so conscious of the history and who has been so open about his desire to win this race for the most majors ever, that he went out there and he didn't have that sense of urgency that you expected from him. While Rafa was just quiet and contained and emoting at all the right times, but completely different attitude. Like he was definitely more mentally prepared than Novak.
Yeah, I thought he was more mentally prepared, and I thought his tactics were spot on. I mean, going to the down the line forehand as early as he possibly could in rallies, and then I thought he was hitting his cross court backhand really well. I thought he was protecting his serve well. I mean, he was just on his game. Whereas I felt like Novak was having a much harder time hitting through the court. Now I want to talk a little bit about the conditions, because obviously, in 2020 they had, it was an indoor final, and it was a bit different balls and all of that. And for all that Rafa talks about, with the heat, he prefers, doesn't know Roland Garros, without the blazing hot conditions. And then, the ball helps his topspin, and he can use his patterns uh, a lot better during the day. But I actually think, there's still a power deficit between the two on clay, and Djokovic finds it a lot harder to hit through Rafa in these slower nighttime conditions. So I'm kind of, I actually don't think this is a great matchup for Djokovic at night. Like I actually think it helps Nadal. It gives him more time, and his forehand is the biggest shot on the court. So
no doubt about that. And there's no doubt that he was as committed to hitting the forehand down the line as I've ever seen him. That he's been doing that more and more in the latter stages of his career, but he realized he had to have that shot working at full force against Novak. And you could see there were balls that seemed to be getting behind him, and he was still able to muscle them down the line for winners. Very impressive. The racket had control to do that. And so I agree with you about all that. But I do think that Djokovic in the second set, and to some extent in the fourth, but especially when he came back in the second, that was the one time I thought he had Rafa full of consternation, it'd be with these two-shot combinations, with the deep returns, hitting outright winners, and sort of making Rafa believe that he didn't have much to say about the outcome of some of those points, that if Novak played that well, he couldn't stop it. And
I thought he played the fourth set impressively in terms of the 0-4 shots. He kept it was a serve and serve +1, but I felt like every time they went into a neutral rally and they went they went into those lengthy baseline exchanges, I felt like Nadal was still the one with greater inner belief.
Yes, he was, and I understandably, because they favored him. But I'm saying I thought Djokovic would have tried to keep employing some of the second set tactics right into the third, which he didn't do. He got back to it to an extent in the fourth, because he played a really good fourth up until the time he didn't close it out at 5-3, and he had the 5-2 lead, of course. So yeah, Rafa played the match. I guess what it comes down to, Vansh, I don't think we're really disagreeing on. He played it more on his terms. I also agree with you that in the end, it was definitely not an advantage for Djokovic to play him at night. The other point that Ivanisevic made was it doesn't help Novak's serve to play him at night. Mm-hmm. And he didn't he shouldn't be losing his serve so many times, a couple of times in the first set, 2 more to go down 2 breaks in the second, 2 more in the third. And another the 7 times, I guess, altogether. That's too many. That shouldn't help. But I don't think that would have happened in daytime conditions. I think he would have gotten a little more help from the speed of the court and the balls traveling through the air faster. There would have been certain advantages for Novak in the day. And Rafa I don't think he could have played too much better than he ended up playing at night. We'll never know. Mm-hmm. But Rafa has this in his head, and you alluded to it earlier. No, traditionally Roland Garros, we play in the day. I don't want to be playing at night. But 2020 dispelled the notion that he cannot handle these conditions, because, as you said, it was an indoor final that year. And also the other times he was playing outdoors prior to the final, it was in October. These are cool conditions in the autumn, post US Open. And he had one of his most convincing French Opens ever. So it's kind of a silly thing. And as you know, everybody made such a big deal about it in advance, and the Rafa was going to be pushing to play it in the day. But in the end, he was very comfortable at night, no doubt about it. What was your take on what might have happened in the fifth set?
I think that's a good question. I'm actually not that sure Djokovic would have won, because I feel like, there was, because of the way the match was going, and because he had that dip after he won the second set, I wasn't sure if he was going to come out with the same conviction at the start of the fifth, and he might just play a poor service game like he did in the third. So, I felt like maybe both we would have had a chance to see them both play well at the same time, and it could have been a classic. That's also my interpretation.
Well, that's the latter is what I would have been hoping for. I would have had the same concerns from his end about maybe starting off in a less than confident fashion and spotting Rafa a break as a result and getting in trouble. Mm-hmm. But I also feeling they both would have been deeply inspired in the fifth, that it would have actually brought out the best in both, and we might have seen something that went right down to the wire.
Yeah,
maybe
a fifth set tiebreak.
It would have been fantastic to see that. Yeah, I think it would have inspired both of them. You echo what I wrote in one of my articles and what I felt, which is that I wouldn't have been too sure. I just would have liked to have seen it. But from Djokovic's end, I wouldn't have been that sure that he was going to produce it in the fifth and use the momentum of the fourth to carry him through the fifth. And then Rafa, being as stubborn as he is and the competitor that he is, he's going to keep making you beat him. So just too bad. But from the standpoint of the fans, obviously the fifth set would have been electrifying. And, we've seen it with them before at Roland Garros, that great 2013 semifinal that Rafa finally won. I mean, it would have been nice to see it on this occasion, especially since they played far too soon, where they shouldn't be meeting in the quarterfinals, and it just would have given the occasion of that little extra luster.
For sure, yeah. By the way, I did also just have one other point I wanted to make. In the 5-3 game where Djokovic was serving in the fourth set, the first point of the game, he gets burned by a Nadal drop shot.
Yeah,
and it's like it was a good disguise by Nadal, but I was a bit surprised Djokovic didn't chase that down until I noticed he almost, he just lost balance. He was a bit too far behind the baseline, and usually when Nadal wins the first point on the other guy's serve at Roland Garros, he breaks 70% of the time. So for me, that was a tilted sign.
You're right. In this case, Novak still went on to have the 2 set points and should have held.
Yeah.
But yes, that point, it was not a good drop shot. I remember Jim Courier saying on television, that was not a good drop shot.
Yes.
He said Novak could have gotten it. I think even with him being off balance, he could have. And I think given the importance of the point, and he knows that Rafa has that tendency to, if he gets you down even love 15, Novak's aware of those things. Uh-huh. So it was surprising that he conceded the point.
Yeah. But now we move ahead. We go to the semis, and I guess first I can get your take on the Alcaraz Zverev match as well, because finally it kind of showed me that Alcaraz is a little human after all, and he didn't play a great first 2 sets. I thought Zverev played one of the better matches I've ever seen him play against. He hadn't beaten a top 10 player before coming in. Very solid first 2 sets from him. Alcaraz just not really able to hit through him. Too many unforced errors. Where he played. It was a brilliant fight back for him to get back in the third, and obviously had that set point in the 4th set tiebreak, where he just missed sort of a routine backhand. And I just I had the feeling, I don't know about you, but I just had the feeling that had it gone to a 5th, I think with the mental baggage that Zverev has, combined with this inner self-belief and conviction that Alcaraz has, along with his winning streak as of late, I felt like he would have won that 5th set.
Totally agree. I will add this to what you said about Sasha in the first 2 sets. Yeah, you described it well. He also served exceedingly well. And so impressive when he's having a great serving day to see him able to hold so easily on clay. And Carlos was really just at a complete loss to do anything about it. Then the other thing that I wanted to add is that, okay, so at the end of the 3rd set, Sasha got a little tight and Carlos wins the set. But then in the 4th, Sasha served for the match.
Yep.
And that was another nervous game from him. That's what made it impressive to me, that he somehow found a way out of that tiebreak. Yeah. And you're right. It was not a great point. Carlos, it was a miss that he could have been avoided. Carlos shouldn't have missed that backhand, but great match point from Sasha with that blazing backhand return winner down the line. Yeah, I thought it was an impressive performance that he held on. And I also completely agree that had Alcaraz won the 4th, I would have heavily favored him in the 5th set. Not to say that Sasha would collapse, but I think Carlos would have been unstoppable at that point. And then that would have been fascinating if we'd had an all-Spanish semi. Really would have been fascinating to see Rafa have to play him rather than Zverev, particularly since the roof was up. Since they were playing under the roof and he was struggling so much with the perspiration against Zverev, just would have been really compelling to see him have to get by Alcaraz, who I think psychologically would have worried him even more. And that's not to minimize what Sasha did, because Sasha played some great tennis against Rafa.
Yeah, I totally agree. You just trust Carlos more in the big moments, which is crazy because this was only a 6th major and Zverev has been in 27 of them. But Now we get to to the semis, this really grueling physical, these sauna-like conditions with the damp clay, and obviously it ended really unfortunately for Zverev with the fall at the end, and you hope he recovers, and that's not a way anybody wanted to see that match, end. And but the fact that it went on 3.5 hours in those conditions just took so much out of Nadal. So I feel like he caught a little bit of a break with that, not going on longer, because we're usually on track for it to go on to 5+ hours.
Yeah, I think it was more than a little break, because I only say that because, okay, if Sasha wins the tiebreak in the second set, we'll never know. Then they'll be out there at least probably a couple more hours at least for 2 more sets. If Sasha doesn't win the tiebreak, still could have been a long third, and Sasha might even still win the third. Who knows? Because Rafa was it was such an ordeal for him with the perspiring under the ropes. So, yeah, I mean, he saved himself a lot of time on court, and ends up being just a little over 3 hours, when they left the court. Then there was that time of back to the locker room before Sasha came back and conceded defeat. So, yeah, but I also think that Sasha, you pointed out his experience versus Carlos' inexperience, but Sasha, there's something about him on these big points in these big matches. It's really concerning. I mean, here's
frail, right? 6-2 up in the tiebreak, and
6-2 up in the tiebreak, and you'd think back to, say, the U.S. Open final of 2020, his big opportunity, 2-0 and a breakup, serves to the match in the 5th set, and it just seems when the chips are down that he just has a way of administering self-inflicted wounds. It's too bad, because 6, and Rafa played some spectacular points from 6-2 down in the tiebreak, but Sasha didn't seem to have that, to know exactly what he wanted to do, and he had played kind of a serve and volley that should have been successful, and he hit the backhand volley long. Rafa aced him on the first set point. Rafa hit a great forehand pass on the run, but Sasha did not come up with the goods, is the bottom line. And then I thought it was even worse, to tell you the truth, when they had that whole string of service breaks, 8 breaks in 9 games. But there he was, serving at 5-3.
Oh yeah.
That was a golden opportunity to say, okay, I know we've had a lot of breaks here, but I've got to buckle down. He serves 3 double faults. So of the 4 points he lost, 3 were double faults.
Yep.
And that was a critical game, because then he's back to 1 set all, and that's why I guess I would have favored Rafa in the tiebreak at that stage. Rafa having escaped that 5-3 game and then love 30 on his own serve in the next game, that I would have liked Rafa's chances in that breaker.
Yep.
We'll never know. But as you said, it was a terribly sad way for the match to end. And who among us could ever forget the scream from Sasha when he went down trying to hit that running forehand, and also the class and dignity he displayed, and coming back out on court in the crutches and shaking the umpire's hand, hugging Rafa. I thought that was just terrific, because he's dying inside.
Yeah, for sure. And then for Nadal's end, that the tiebreak that he played, he gave his box a little bit of a stare after he won that. It wasn't his usual trademark celebration. And you would have thought, after that he'd sort of carry that momentum into the second set, which he did. He went up an early break and he was up 40-15. And you thought, okay, this set is running away. But I thought Zverev did such a good job of, he got himself back in pole position of winning that set. He could have easily let that go. And that's why it was a shame that
right about that look. It wasn't, it was almost like Rafa was saying to them, I got away with something there. I'm a little lucky to get out of that. Which is humble of him, because it was also his own doing. But I just think he was not enjoying those conditions were really trying for him. And
he was sweating a lot, like crazy.
And then Sasha, I have to say, Zverev looked so good to me physically. I had the feeling he could have played 5 sets if he had to. It's just that I wouldn't have trusted him mentally, down to the wire. Even if it went to 4-all in the 5th, I'd still be saying Rafa's going to win this match.
Yep. Yeah, particularly with how many times he's failed to close out, matches, and especially all the baggage that he's built up over the course of these events. But it was definitely, he was going into that final against Ruud, knowing fully well that he didn't really have to change his game a lot. In fact, not at all really, because his pattern against this cross court forehand against Ruud's, short, spinny, two-handed backhand that can be effective, but it just it requires a lot more time, and Nadal's able to rush that wing. And then I thought Nadal did such a good job in the final with his cross court backhand as well, opening up that side. And
he did too. He the same way. I think that pleased him even more. He expected to have that success with that pattern of his heavy topspin forehand up to the Ruud backhand, but he wasn't as sure that his backhand was going to be that good. So once that came, when he was firing that well with the flatter cross court backhands, then Ruud really had no chance. I will only add this though, Vansh, that pretty good first set. Ruud broke back once and made a go of it. And then he goes up 3-1 in the second. You didn't feel like they're going to win the set, but I also didn't think he was going to lose 11 games in a row. Mm-hmm. And that was unfortunate. Yes, it's his first major final and it's intimidating to play someone as the all-time great on clay. There's a lot of understandable reasons, but you would have liked to have seen him stay in there a little bit better than he did. And play a better third set. It just wasn't to be. And Rafa really did pounce when he saw the opportunity to close that match out in a hurry. And there was no stopping him that.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, you have the dynamic of him training at the Nadal Academy, being there for the last 3 or 4 years, looking up to Nadal, idolizing him really, and seeing him win all of his Roland Garros basically from 2005. And he was even in the crowd in 2013, watching Nadal do his thing. And so, from one angle, you could have said, okay, so then maybe he has a good read on sort of, tactically how he needs to approach this match. And like you said, did a very good job to go up 3-1, hit a really nice down the line forehand, which gave him the break in the second set. And you thought, okay, he's going to keep this respectable, maybe a 3-3-2, 3-3-3, something like that.
Right.
I really felt like, you could even see it in the press conference afterwards that he was definitely resigned at the end in that match. And even he was asked a question by one of the reporters, like, what is the one moment in this match that you take away? And he mentioned the Nadal backhand winner on championship point as the moment. So I think to me that was quite revealing.
Yeah, you hope that he'll learn from that, and the people around him will remind him that Rafa is very fond of Casper too, except that when the bell rings to go out there and play the match, he answers it. And his attitude is, okay, I'm going to win this match cleanly, and there's going to be no gamesmanship, but for the next 2 hours, this is my enemy. I really think that's how he looks at things. Not personally, but just like, I'm here to do a job. I'm here to win. And Ruud has come a long ways, and he's become a very good competitor. I love the way that he battled through that match against Holger Rune, which was a contentious clash.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I loved the way he had it he had a certain attitude there that he didn't like Rune's behavior, and I didn't blame him. Mm-hmm. But I saw some real mental toughness there.
Yeah.
And I saw a little more mental toughness out of him in the semifinals of Rome against Novak. He battled hard. He lost in straight, but he stayed in there better. So I think the people around him have to say, listen, you and Rafa can enjoy each other off the court and train at the academy some more and be friends. But when you're out there, you've got to be, above all, a competitor. So he could have gotten a bit more out of the final than he did, but not to be too harsh on him, because he had a phenomenal tournament to reach his first major final. And I think that in the end is going to matter a lot as the rest of this season unfolds. He's going to feel like he does belong, and that he won't feel it was freakish that he got to the final. Yes, he was on the weaker half of the draw, clearly, but I think it'll fuel him with some self-belief going forward.
Yeah. I'm also impressed, by him physically to get through a lot of these matches, because a lot of these weren't easy in the bottom half of the draw. And he played the week before in Geneva. Could have easily lost the final there against João Sousa, but he comes back and he wins. And could have gone 5 sets against Tsonga. Was down 2-1 against Sonego, which I felt like was a big thing for him, especially since he had lost his last few French Open campaigns in the third round, especially last against Fokina. But what really impressed me was also the game that he played in the second set against Cilic. When he had lost the first set 6-3, and Cilic has these 3 break points to break him back, and all of a sudden it's 5-all in the second. But he comes up with a forehand winner, an unreturned serve, another forehand winner, an ace, and a backhand winner. And from there, he never really looked back. And one of those things.
That was impressive. You're right. That could have gotten very dangerous. I did like his chances going into the match to win in 4, but you're right. If he had not pulled things out in the clutch in that game, it could have been different because Cilic was on a really nice roll himself and to be in the semis and pushing hard to get to the final. You're right. Then the way he played from that point forward, though, was just very impressive stuff. Completely took control of the rest of the match.
Yeah, couldn't agree. And I also feel like he has a lot more grown confidence on hard court. He made the year-end championship semifinals last year. Prior to this, his best result was an Australian Open 4th round, and the Miami final this year, which was a decently close match against Alcaraz. So I really feel like he's come a long way. It'll be interesting to see how he does on the grass.
It will. I think he can do okay on the grass. I don't think it's going to be his best surface, and I think he'll do better on the hard over the summer. But he'll do all right. And he obviously, this does give him a lift. I think he'll feel as if he might be ready to demand a little bit more out of himself now. That he wants to make a habit out of this kind of showing at a major. So he'll go hard after Wimbledon.
Yeah, for sure. And then for Nadal, obviously, to get to number 22, and obviously we'll see how the what happens with his decision at Wimbledon, because obviously he's just undergone a radio frequency ablation in which there's basically through radio waves they inserted a needle into the nerves, and it's some kind of a nerve burning procedure. I'm not really a medical expert, but it seems like either that's the option that's going to work, or he'll have to undergo a major surgery, and then that could take him out of the game for many, many months. So it'll be interesting because he's in an interesting situation. Obviously, just like Djokovic last year, he's won the first 2 majors and he's going for the Grand Slam. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's obviously why he wants to just give himself the chance to play there and hopefully be healthy. I don't know what to expect. As you know, his recent history at Wimbledon has not been what he would have wanted. He last won the title in 2010, then lost to Djokovic in the 11th final, had a string of tough defeats, but then did manage to have a couple of decent Wimbledons after that. It lost to Roger in the semis in 19, lost to Novak in a classic 5-setter the year before, and he would have won that tournament because the winner of Novak Rafa was going to play Kevin Anderson, who was exhausted from the Isner semi. So that was another opportunity, but he's had some hard luck on these lawns, and it's not his best surface. But I do think the way he plays these days, if he's healthy, he'll contend. He'll contend strong, and you hope that we can be able to see that this procedure will work. We can only just cross our fingers on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think this means overall? I guess for the whole. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more that goes into who is the most accomplished player of all time. I don't really like to use the word greatest because obviously that's that involves some more subjectivity. But I guess, with 22 and, given all the other records that Djokovic has with the weeks at number 1 and, they've both won every major twice. Do you think because of the overall, more accomplished player that Djokovic is on all the surfaces, that Nadal needs to distance himself a bit more in the Grand Slam race? And of course, I mean, he's 2 away, which is already, he's 2 ahead, which is already pretty big. But if he goes up 3, it's going to be pretty hard to argue against him. That's why I feel like this Wimbledon is really critical for Djokovic because he hasn't won one since last year.
Oh no, it's definitely critical. No, I would say, Vansh, that it's the debate will linger for a long time. I don't think he necessarily has to make it 3, but if he's able to maintain, even if somehow Novak wins Wimbledon, Rafa got another French next year, if it ends up with a 2 tournament edge, that's still significant. Yeah. On the other hand, people are gonna focus too on Novak's 7 years at number 1, ending 7 years at number 1, the record number of weeks. They'll look at all those things and the surface diversity, as you said. His record is a more balanced record than Rafa's. On the other hand, I think that Rafa, the fact that he got that Australian, I think was a big deal because for him to match Djokovic in the career set of at least 2 majors at all 4 it proves that, and he even has 1 more U.S. Open than Novak at this point, 4-3. Yeah, and Novak with the big edge at Wimbledon, with the big edge in Australia with his 9 titles. But it still becomes a very fierce debate on both sides of the aisle, don't you think? I mean,
it does. Very back and forth.
If Novak had kept going, if Novak had won the Grand Slam, that would have been something that would have probably pushed him over the top. because that nobody else would have done that since Laver. And if he would have maintained his lead, but a lot has changed. It was so improbable that we'd be sitting here now talking about Rafa winning the first two majors of 2022, given the physical condition he was in the second half of last year, and the only match he played one match after Roland Garros, and comes in and makes that spectacular recovery against Medvedev in the finals of the Australian from 2 sets down and 2-3 love 40 in the third. I mean, this has been a sea change in a lot of ways. We would have thought maybe Djokovic would have the 2 tournament edge by now at the end of last year. It's not the case. Mm-hmm. So, but I do think Djokovic will have the urgency. You know, you talked about how critical. You said critical. It will be a critical tournament, but I think he'll respond well to that because he's so comfortable at Wimbledon, and he's won there the last 3 times he's played in 18, 19, and 21. There was no tournament in 20. So I believe that, and I think he just feels like he adjusts better to that surface than anybody else. Gets down so low to the ball, and you know it really does. The current grass court conditions suit him beautifully, and so I believe that the enduring success he's had on that court is going to help him this time around. Plus, just what you said, he hasn't won a major since Wimbledon last year, and had the heartbreak of losing to Medvedev in the U.S. Open final, 1 match short of the Slam, and then not able to play Australia at all, and a disappointing match against Rafa in the quarters of Roland Garros. So if ever he was going to be highly motivated, this is the time.
Yep. I totally agree. And he's definitely the favorite going into Wimbledon. But I guess before we go on to the women's, another name that I kind of had, wanted to get your take on is, Stefanos Tsitsipas, because obviously he had, he was the favorite in the bottom half, and he had won Monte Carlo. He'd reached the Rome final. He had made the Madrid semis. He had quarters. He pushed Alcaraz, lost in 3 sets there. But I never felt like he was playing as well as he was last year. And he was kind of getting through a lot of these matches, but not really with his best stuff. Winning more ugly against, I remember in Monte Carlo, he could have lost to Schwartzman, probably should have lost with that deficit that he had in the third. And then even Dimitrov had match points against him in Rome, but didn't take them. And then, here I felt like he was a bit fortunate to get out of the Musetti match, used his experience and played fantastically the last 3 sets, but Musetti really had a dip. And obviously he goes long in the second round, and then he had a comfortable match in the third round. But then I felt like Holger Rune was really able to expose some of those weaknesses, that we were talking about, especially in the post AO podcast. So
yeah, he did expose them. I agree. Here's what I'd say. Those are very good points. His overall level was not as high. He was winning more comfortably last year. On the other hand, his clay court campaign was quite similar in terms of results.
Yes.
So I thought and then when he saw the draw, I would have thought he was feeling quite good about the draw, given that Nadal and Djokovic and Alcaraz are all on the other side. He certainly didn't want to play Carlos again. So I was puzzled. I thought you're right about Rune. On the other hand, Stefanos was not coasting, but he had the quick early break. He's 3-1 up, and suddenly his forehand approach deserted him badly. He had control of that first set. If he holds for 4-1, he's probably going to win the first set. It could have been a very different match.
Yeah.
And then almost came back at the end when Rune seemed to be cramping, or he certainly was feeling it mentally, very tense. But it was disappointing to me. I mean, at least a year ago when he didn't come through, he beat Medvedev in the quarters, he beat Zverev in the semis, and he had Novak down 2 sets to love. It was still a great tournament. This was not, and it's another setback for him. And I don't know what to expect from him at Wimbledon. So far it hasn't been a pleasant experience for him there. We may not see much from him at Wimbledon. I think the key is going to be, how does he perform over the summer on the hard courts, and can he get himself back in contention at the Open after the 5-set loss to Carlos a year ago, which was a tough defeat for him. But at this stage, I think we have someone who's a little bit worried, Vansh. He keeps talking big. He talks about he was thrilled to get to number 3. And then he was talking earlier in this year about he thinks he's going to finish the year in the top 2. But I think he needs to get the focus back more on winning tournaments and winning majors. Yeah, because that hasn't been happening. We're still waiting at the majors, and he should win more of the regular tour events than he does.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And then I also think, what could be a positive for him is that he has more time this year on the grass, having lost early. He's playing this week in Stuttgart. He's played very few grass court matches. So for him, it's really, he shouldn't have very many expectations on the grass. And then it's all about what he does this summer. And if he can actually stay healthy the rest of the year, which was a bit of a problem last year as well.
Yeah, I hope that's the point. I hope the preparation does help him, but I think he's reeling a bit right now. I don't think he's terribly happy with the way things turned out at Roland Garros. And I think going in, he wanted to feel like he would be the master on his half of the draw, and then he'd only have to play Novak, Rafa, or Carlos. And he, of course, never arrived for that appointment. So
yeah,
I hope you're right. I hope the fact that he can get a lot more match play in prior to going to the All England club, that can make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Now I guess we should talk about Iga Swiatek, because what she's doing is absolutely remarkable, and the most dominant number one you would have seen in many years, especially since you have to take into account that Barty retired, and how quick of a transition that was. Really didn't even feel like a transition, and that's to her credit, because she's so much better right now than the rest of the field, that it's absolutely remarkable what she's doing. 35 matches in a row, 6 titles in a row, and she was pushed in the third round and fourth round here, and for a set by Zhang, and she lost a set, and even then you still didn't really feel like she was going to lose. So
no, I never did. I'm sure you didn't either. Yeah, she's carrying herself like the dominant number one that she is, and I think she badly wanted to get the French Open back and win it for the second time. Now she's done that, and I don't feel I don't sense there'll be quite as much pressure oddly going forward, because it's not as if she's going for a Grand Slam. So I think she can just take Wimbledon and the Open as separate units and go after them full force. And I can't imagine she's not winning at least one of the two. It wouldn't shock me if she won them both, because as you said, she really is that much better than anybody else. And I'm sorry that Barty left, retired, because we could have had a really emerging rivalry.
Yeah.
But the two, and we'll see where it goes. But at this stage, I'm happy for the women that they have a bona fide number one who really embraces being the best and can run off a 35 match winning streak and keep it going. It's just been too long since we've had somebody like that relishes being at the top and believes that she belongs at the top. So I love her combination, by the way. I'm sure you do too. The combination of the offense and the defense, it's just irresistible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find that her forehand is the biggest shot in the women's game right now by some distance.
Yeah, it is. Oh, far and away. And the backhand is rock solid, and she moves it around well and very accurate. But yes, the forehand, she can do almost anything she wants. And then she comes off of defense onto offense in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just impressed by her resilience and her mental strength as well, because to come through this tournament like she did unscathed. Okay, it's one thing to win it in 2020 and lose just 28 games, and and I guess last year she didn't quite follow up with a great year, like some had hoped. But then the way she is, the way she played with that weight of expectations on her shoulder, and with so much pressure, because basically anything other than a loss would have been disappointing. So
listen, it's been a long time coming for the women's game. Ash Barty was a really elegant, commendable champion, and it was nice to see her get Wimbledon last year and add that to the French that she'd previously won, and then top it off with the Australian this year. But she didn't, by all accounts, she didn't enjoy the traveling. She didn't like the life that much. Yeah. I think Swiatek does. I think she's very comfortable in that, leading that life and chasing those dreams, and definitely comfortable with being at the top. So I've wanted this for women's tennis for a long time, to have someone step up like that and say, okay, I'm the best, and I'm going to keep proving it week after week, surface after surface.
Mm-hmm. And just looking ahead to Wimbledon, obviously she's only played 12 matches on grass, and she's won 7 and lost 5, and she's a junior Wimbledon champion. Last year it took a great performance from Ons Jabeur to beat her in the 4th round. But just going into that and just knowing that it's a surface she's less comfortable on, and the kick serve won't work as effectively. There may be other opponents who serve extremely well on the day and take her out. Maybe a Yelena Ostapenko type who just takes the ball really early, or Danielle Collins, the two players that she last lost to in the streak. But is there any, or maybe someone comes along with variety and maybe makes things a little bit more challenging for her? Someone like a Karolina Mukova, I'm thinking, well, with her slice backhand, and if she can stay healthy. But it's so hard to envision someone beating her right now. Like, she's just leaps and bounds ahead.
Yeah, I don't put too much stock on the 7-5 grass court, right? The stats from the past don't mean much right now because she's lifted her entirely new level. You're right about the kick serve, and you're right about the types of players that could catch her on any given day and hit her off the court, but it's still going to be very difficult. Mm-hmm. And these grass courts are not playing like Wimbledon did, 20 years ago. Yep. So they're to her liking now, and I think she'll adapt very well, by the way. And I suspect if she can string together 3 good matches, over the course of that first week, get herself into the round of 16, at that point, she may well be unstoppable.
Yep, I totally agree. And adaptability is one of her main strengths. But also looking at the finalists, Coco Gauff, she's also come a long way. Nothing crazy the last 3 years, but very steady, kind of incremental progress from her, and to get to the final here, I think was a great result. And in some ways, I think it's good for her that she got demolished in the final, because I think she'll learn a lot from it. And definitely her forehand, which is her biggest weakness, was majorly exposed again. And I think that, and I mean that in a great way, because I think the rest of her game is spectacular. I really have a lot of admiration for Coco, and I've been following her very closely the last 3 years. But do you have a feeling that, in the next couple of years, especially 2 or 3 years, she'll be right in the mix and she'll be winning these things?
Well, I concur with you 100% on that. And I also do agree, for the same reasons, that this was, there's no sense her losing 4 and 5 to Iga, because Iga's tight and not playing particularly well. It's better for her to play a top of the line world number 1 and learn. And she will learn. I think Coco's worked hard on her forehand. It was still exposed, no doubt about it. But I think she's been steadily trying to improve it, and eventually will. And same with the second serve. I think, these are areas that she'll continue to zone in on. But I was glad for her to take advantage of a really favorable draw, get to that final, and now she can build from there. I still think it was very uplifting for her to find herself around there for the final Saturday and out there playing for the title. And even if it didn't go as well as she wanted and she didn't get a set or come close to it, she comes away from Roland Garros, as a better competitor, and looking forward to the whole summer. She'll do well at Wimbledon, by the way. We know what she can do on grass.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And she's in, so we have a lot of great storylines, heading into Wimbledon. And I look forward to speaking to you again, hopefully, after the tournament or sometime before, if we get a chance. But it's been a pleasure, Steve, and it was great having you again, and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Same here, Vansh. I enjoyed it, and I do look forward to the post-Wimbledon talk, and it'll be interesting to see, because when it comes to the men, it certainly looks, after the operation that Sasha Zverev just had, it's hard to imagine he can possibly play the tournament. We know we have no Medvedev there. Yeah. So the cast, both Zverev and Medvedev would have been strong contenders. So we're going to have fewer this year. Hurkacz, I think, will be dangerous again, by the way. People should not overlook Hurkacz on the grass. But I do think when you take Medvedev and Zverev out of the equation, it makes Novak an even larger favorite.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, with the whole no points thing at Wimbledon, that's going to also affect the way some players go into these matches, and it's going to have a different sort of feel to grass than what we're used to.
Well, I just hope, Vansh, that you brought up an important point. I just hope, we heard Osaka make some comments shortly after that. The points situation was announced by both tours. And you almost seem to be using it as an excuse to not go at that point, saying, there's no points. Yeah. I hope I don't think any of the other leading players are going to think about that at all. I think they're disappointed, probably, because they believe it's an injustice. But I don't think anybody's going to think anything different about Wimbledon this year than they have in any other year, in the sense they know it's the preeminent showcase event of the sport. And I think all the leading players will treat it as seriously as they always have.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's always been the tournament, that you associate with tennis for ages. So it'll be spectacular seeing it again. And yep, looking forward to it, and looking forward to our post major chat at Wimbledon.
Oh, all right, Vansh, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Yep, enjoyed it thoroughly. And take care, Steve.
You too.